The bay mare's hooves churned up dust on the main street of Oro Blanco, Arizona. And Catherine Ward knew every man watching from the wooden sidewalks could see the brand on the animal's flank that did not match any story she might tell. The September sun of 1882 beat down mercilessly as she rode straight-backed past the saloon, past the general store, past the marshal's office with its peeling paint and judgmental windows, her calico dress dusty from 3 days of hard riding, and her dark hair escaping its braid in wild tendrils that spoke of desperation and determination in equal measure. She did not look left or right, did not acknowledge the stares or the whispers already starting to spread like wildfire through the small mining town, nestled in the Arizona Territory hills. The livery stable sat at the far end of town, a weathered structure that leaned slightly to the left as though tired from years of holding up under the relentless sun. Catherine guided the mare toward it, her hands steady on the reins despite the trembling that had started somewhere deep in her chest. She had not eaten properly in 2 days, had barely slept, and the canteen at her hip had run dry somewhere around dawn. But she would not show weakness, not here, not when she had come so far. A man stepped out from the shadowed interior of the stable, and Catherine's breath caught despite herself. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with shoulders that spoke of years of hard work and sun-bronzed skin that suggested he spent more time outdoors than in. His hair was the color of dark honey, pushed back from a face that was handsome in a rugged, lived-in sort of way, all strong jaw and straight nose and eyes the color of summer grass that seemed to take in everything about her in one sweeping glance. He wore dusty work clothes, a chambray shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows and denim pants tucked into scuffed boots, and there was something about the easy way he moved that suggested confidence without arrogance. "That is a fine-looking horse," he said, his voice a low drawl that carried the hint of somewhere farther east, maybe Texas or Oklahoma. His eyes had already found the brand, she could tell, but instead of the accusation she expected, she saw something else in his expression. Understanding, maybe. Or curiosity. "She is thirsty," Catherine said, because it was the truth, and because she could think of nothing else to say. Her own voice sounded strange to her ears, rough from disuse and dust. The man studied her for a long moment, and Catherine forced herself to meet his gaze without flinching. She had learned long ago that showing fear invited trouble, and she had already courted enough trouble to last a lifetime. Then, slowly, deliberately, he smiled. It was not a mocking smile or a knowing smile, but something gentler, something that crinkled the corners of his eyes and softened the hard lines of his face. "I imagine you are too," he said. "Why don't you climb down from there and I will get you both some water? Got fresh grain for the mare as well, if you are interested." Catherine hesitated. 3 days ago she had stolen this horse from the man who claimed to own her, the man who had bought her father's debts and thought that gave him the right to own Catherine too. She had left him bleeding in his own stable, struck down with a shovel when he had tried to force himself on her, and she did not know if he was alive or dead. She only knew she had taken his best horse and ridden hard for the border, for anywhere that was not the dusty ranch outside of Tucson, where she had been little better than a slave for the past 8 months. Trust did not come easily anymore. But the man was still smiling, patient, and the mare beneath her was trembling with exhaustion. "I do not have money to pay you," she said flatly. "Better to be honest about that from the start." "Did not ask if you did," the man replied. He moved closer slowly and reached up to stroke the mare's neck. His hands were large, calloused, gentle. "Name is Parker Brennan. I run this stable, and I have a policy about not letting animals suffer on account of human pride or poverty." So let me help the horse at least, and we can figure out the rest after." Catherine swung down from the saddle, and the moment her feet hit the ground her legs nearly buckled. She grabbed the stirrup to steady herself, cursing her weakness, and then Parker's hand was on her elbow, supporting her with a touch that was firm but not constraining. "When did you last eat?" he asked, and there was concern in his voice now, real and unfeigned. "I am fine," Catherine said, but her stomach chose that moment to betray her with a loud growl that echoed in the quiet stable yard. Parker chuckled, not unkindly. "Right. Fine as frog's hair, I can see that. Come on inside and sit down before you fall down. I will take care of your horse first, and then we are going to get some food in you." He led the mare into the stable, and Catherine followed because she did not know what else to do. The interior was cooler, dim after the bright sunlight, smelling of hay and leather and horse. It was clean, she noticed, cleaner than she would have expected. The stalls were mucked out, the tack was neatly organized on the walls, and there was a sense of order and care that spoke well of the man who ran the place. Parker led the mare to a stall and began removing her tack with practiced efficiency. Catherine watched, leaning against a support post because standing without it seemed like too much effort as he worked. He moved with the easy competence of someone who had done this 1,000 times, his hands quick and sure, talking to the mare in a low, soothing voice as he worked. "She has been ridden hard," he said, not looking at Catherine. It was not quite an accusation, but close enough. "Yes," Catherine said. "No point in lying about what was obvious." "You running from something or to something?" Parker asked. He had the saddle off now and was examining the mare's back for sores. Catherine considered the question. "Both, maybe, or neither. Does it matter?" Parker glanced at her over the horse's back. "Might. Depends on what kind of trouble is following you. This is a small town, Miss." "Ward," Catherine supplied. "Catherine Ward." "Miss Ward," Parker continued, "and small towns have a way of noticing strangers. Especially strangers who ride in on stolen horses." So he had recognized the brand. Catherine straightened, her hand instinctively going to the knife she had tucked in her boot. "Are you planning to turn me in, Mr. Brennan? Are you planning to stab me if I say yes?" He sounded more amused than concerned. "I would prefer not to," Catherine said honestly. "You have been kind and I have had enough of hurting people, but I will not go back. I would rather die." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Parker studied her for a long moment, taking in her torn dress, her sunburned face, the desperate determination in her eyes. Then he nodded slowly and turned back to the horse. "That brand belongs to Gerald Hutchins, if I am not mistaken," he said quietly. "Runs a ranch outside of Tucson. Mean son of a bitch, pardon my language. Known for working his hands hard and paying them less. I heard tell he has other business interests too, less savory ones." Catherine said nothing, but her silence was answer enough. Parker fetched a bucket of water and set it in front of the mare, who drank deeply. He ran his hands over her legs, checking for injuries, then straightened and looked at Catherine again. "I am going to ask you one question, Miss Ward, and I want you to answer me truthful. Did you kill anyone getting away from Gerald Hutchins?" "I do not know," Catherine said. The words came out barely above a whisper. "I hit him with a shovel when he tried to, when he was going to, but I did not stay to check if he was still breathing. I just ran." Parker's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping in his cheek. "I see. And I am guessing you had good reason to hit him." "The best reason," Catherine said bitterly. "He bought my father's debts after Daddy died, said I could work them off, but the work he wanted." She could not finish the sentence, but she did not need to. Parker's expression had gone hard as stone. "Right then," he said after a moment, "here is what is going to happen. I am going to stable this mare in the back where she will not be visible from the street." Going to file off that brand too, give her a few days to heal, and then we will see about finding her a new home. You are going to come up to my place, get cleaned up, get fed, and get some sleep. Tomorrow we will figure out what comes next." Catherine stared at him. "Why would you do that?" "You do not know me. I could be lying. I could rob you in your sleep." Parker smiled again, that same gentle smile that seemed at odds with his rough exterior. "You could, but I do not think you will. I am a pretty good judge of character, Miss Ward, and what I see when I look at you is not a thief or a liar. I see someone who has been pushed past their limit and fought back the only way they knew how. I see someone who needs help, and around here, we help folks who need it." "Around here," Catherine repeated, "meaning you and who else?" "This whole town, meaning me," Parker said firmly. "And that is enough for now. Come on. Let me get this mare settled and then we will get you taken care of." He was true to his word. He moved the mare to a back stall, out of sight from anyone who might come looking, and gave her grain and fresh hay and another bucket of water. Then he locked up the stable and led Catherine down a side street to a small house that sat on the edge of town, modest but well-maintained, with a narrow porch and curtains in the windows that suggested someone actually lived there, not just existed. Inside it was neat and sparse, furnished with simple but sturdy furniture that looked handmade. Parker directed Catherine to a chair in the small kitchen and set about making coffee and heating up what looked like leftover stew. Catherine sat because her legs would not hold her up anymore and watched as this stranger, this kind man who had no reason to trust her, moved around his kitchen preparing food for her. "You live here alone?" she asked, because the silence felt too heavy. "I do now," Parker said. "Used to live here with my brother, but he moved to California last year, chasing gold or dreams or something. I get a letter from him every few months telling me about his adventures." "And you stayed here," Catherine said. "I like it here," Parker replied. He set a bowl of stew in front of her, along with a thick slice of bread and a cup of steaming coffee. "Oro Blanco is a good town, mostly, quiet. The people are decent, and I like working with horses. Seems like honest work." Catherine picked up the spoon, and her hand was shaking so badly she nearly dropped it. Parker noticed but did not comment, just settled himself across from her with his own cup of coffee and waited while she ate. The stew was good, simple but flavorful, and Catherine had to force herself not to gulp it down like a starving animal. She had been raised with manners, even if recent circumstances had stripped away most of her dignity. "How long were you at Hutchins Ranch?" Parker asked after a while. 8 months, Catherine said between bites. "Since my father died. He had debts, gambling debts mostly. Hutchins showed up at the funeral with papers that said Daddy owed him nearly $2,000. I had nothing, no way to pay. He said I could work it off at his ranch." "I thought he meant cooking and cleaning." She laughed, a bitter sound. "I was so stupid." "You were not stupid," Parker said firmly. "You were desperate and grieving, and he took advantage of that. That is on him, not you." Catherine finished the stew and sat back, feeling more human than she had in days. "He tried to touch me the first week. I fought him off and he laughed, said I had spirit, said he liked that in a woman. After that it was constant. He would corner me in the kitchen, in the barn, anywhere I was alone. His hands were always on me. I complained to his foreman, but the man just laughed. Said I should be grateful Mr. Hutchins found me pretty." Parker's hands had curled into fists on the table, but his voice remained calm. "What changed 3 days ago? He told me my debt was paid off," Catherine said quietly. "Said I had worked enough and I could go free. I was so happy, so relieved. I packed my few things and was heading out when he stopped me. Said there was one more thing I owed him. Said he had been patient long enough and it was time I showed him proper gratitude." She swallowed hard. He dragged me into the stable, tore my dress. I grabbed a shovel and I hit him as hard as I could. He went down and did not get up. I took his horse and I ran. Good, Parker said fiercely. You did exactly right. I might have killed him, Catherine whispered. Then the world is a better place, Parker replied. And before you say anything else, I mean that. Some men do not deserve mercy, Miss Ward. Some men deserve exactly what they get. Catherine looked at him, this stranger who was defending her, protecting her, offering her sanctuary without asking for anything in return. Why are you being so kind to me? Parker was quiet for a moment, staring down into his coffee cup. I had a sister once, he said finally. Sarah. She was 2 years younger than me, prettiest girl in our hometown of Fort Worth. When she was 17, she fell in love with a man who seemed charming and successful. Our parents approved the match. They were married within 6 months. He paused, his jaw working. It took less than a year for the bruises to start showing. She tried to hide them, but I knew. I confronted her and she swore everything was fine, that she had just been clumsy. I did not push it. I should have, but I did not. What happened? Catherine asked softly. She died, Parker said flatly. Fell down the stairs, her husband said, broke her neck. Everyone believed him because he was respectable and well-liked, and she had always been clumsy, had she not. But I knew he had pushed her, I just could not prove it. I am so sorry, Catherine said. Parker looked up at her, and his green eyes were bright with old pain. I swore after Sarah died that I would never stand by again when a woman was in trouble, never ignore the signs, never assume someone else would help. So when you rode into town on that stolen horse, looking scared and desperate and defiant all at once, I knew. And I decided right then that I was going to help you, whatever it took. Catherine felt tears pricking at her eyes, the first tears she had allowed herself since fleeing Tucson. Thank you, she managed. You are welcome, Parker said. Now finish your coffee and I will show you where you can sleep. You look like you are about to fall over. He was right. The food and the warmth and the simple kindness had undone something in Catherine, some tightly wound spring that had been keeping her upright and moving. She followed Parker through the small house to an even smaller bedroom, simply furnished with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a trunk. This was my brother's room, Parker said. You can stay here as long as you need. There is water in the pitcher for washing up, and I will see if I can find you some clean clothes. My brother's things might fit you well enough for now. I cannot impose on you like this, Catherine protested weakly. You are not imposing, Parker said. You are accepting help, which is different. Now get some rest. We can talk more in the morning. He left, closing the door softly behind him, and Catherine stood alone in the quiet room. She moved to the washstand and caught sight of herself in the small mirror that hung above it. She barely recognized the woman staring back at her. Her face was sunburned and streaked with dust, her hair a tangled mess, her eyes haunted and hollow. She looked like someone who had been through hell and barely survived. Slowly, carefully, she washed her face and hands, the cool water soothing on her burned skin. Then she stripped off her torn, dirty dress and put on the nightshirt she found folded in the trunk. It was far too large, hanging almost to her knees, but it was clean and soft and smelled faintly of soap. She climbed into the bed, intending to just rest for a moment, and was asleep before her head fully settled on the pillow. She woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of coffee and bacon. For a moment she was disoriented, unsure where she was, and then memory returned in a rush. Oro Blanco, Parker Brennan, the stolen horse. She sat up quickly, her heart pounding, and then forced herself to breathe slowly. She was safe. For now, at least, she was safe. There were clothes laid out on the trunk, she saw. A shirt and pants that looked like they would fit reasonably well, along with clean undergarments and even socks. Catherine dressed quickly, braiding her hair as well as she could without a proper brush, and ventured out into the main room. Parker was in the kitchen, cooking breakfast. He looked up when she entered and smiled. "Morning. Sleep well. Better than I have in months," Catherine admitted. "Thank you for the clothes." "My brothers," Parker confirmed. "Figured they would be more practical than a dress given your situation." "You hungry?" "Starving," Catherine said, and was rewarded with another of those gentle smiles. They ate breakfast together, and Catherine marveled at how easy it was to sit with this man, this near stranger, and feel comfortable. Parker did not press her with questions, did not demand explanations or plans. He just talked about simple things, the weather, the town, the horses currently in his stable. It was peaceful, almost normal, and Catherine found herself relaxing despite everything. "What is your plan?" Parker asked eventually as they were finishing up. "I mean long term." "You cannot stay hidden forever." "I do not know," Catherine admitted. "I thought I would just keep riding, maybe head to California or up to Colorado, find work somewhere, start over with a new name." Parker nodded thoughtfully. "That is one option, but you should know Gerald Hutchins is not dead." Catherine's heart stopped. "How do you know?" "Went into town early this morning, did some asking around," Parker said. "Seems news travels fast. Hutchins is laid up with a cracked skull and a serious grudge. He is telling everyone you are a thief who stole his horse and tried to murder him. Put up a reward for your capture." "How much?" Catherine asked faintly. $200, Parker said. "Not enough to bring in professional bounty hunters, but enough to make folks around here pay attention." Catherine stood abruptly, panic flooding through her. "I need to leave. Now. Before someone recognizes me, before the marshal comes looking. I have put you in enough danger already." Parker stood too, moving around the table to face her. "Catherine, listen to me. Running right now is the worst thing you can do. You are exhausted, you have no supplies, no money, and now every two-bit opportunist between here and California is going to be looking for a woman matching your description. You will not make it a day." "Then what do you suggest?" Catherine demanded. "That I just wait here for them to find me." "I suggest you let me help you," Parker said. "Really help you. I have been thinking about this all morning, and I have an idea." Catherine crossed her arms, fear making her defensive. "What kind of idea?" "You need a new identity," Parker said. "A reason to be in Oro Blanco that no one will question, and I need." He paused, seeming to struggle with the words. "I could use some help around the stable. The work is getting to be more than I can handle alone, especially now that my brother is gone." "You want to hire me?" Catherine said skeptically. "I want to protect you," Parker corrected. "If you are working for me, living here, people will accept that. They will not question it. And if anyone comes around asking about a woman traveling alone, well, you will not match that description anymore, will you?" Catherine stared at him. "You would do that, lie for me, risk your reputation, maybe even your freedom for someone you just met?" Parker met her gaze steadily. "Yes," he said simply. "I would." "Why?" Catherine whispered. "Because it is the right thing to do," Parker said. "Because you deserve a chance to start over, because—" He hesitated, then continued. "Because when I look at you, I see someone worth saving. And I could not save Sarah, but maybe I can save you." Catherine felt tears sliding down her cheeks, and this time she did not try to stop them. "I do not know what to say." "Say yes," Parker said gently. "Say you will stay at least for a while. Let me help you, please." Catherine took a shaky breath. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will stay." The smile that broke across Parker's face was like sunrise, warm and brilliant and full of promise. "Good," he said. "That is good. Now come on, we have work to do." The next few days passed in a blur of activity. Parker introduced Catherine around town as his new stable hand, explaining that she was from back east and looking for work. A few people gave her curious looks, but no one questioned the story too closely. Oro Blanco was the kind of town where people minded their own business, and a woman working in a stable was unusual but not unheard of. Catherine took to the work with determination. She had grown up around horses, back when her father was still alive and they had owned a small ranch, and the skills came back quickly. She mucked out stalls, hauled water, fed and groomed the horses that were boarded at the stable. It was hard, physical work that left her exhausted at the end of each day, but it was honest work, and there was satisfaction in that. Parker was a patient teacher, showing her the particular quirks of each horse, the best way to handle the stubborn ones, how to spot signs of illness or injury. He worked alongside her, never asking her to do anything he would not do himself, and Catherine found herself watching him when she thought he was not looking. The way his muscles moved under his shirt when he lifted heavy saddles, the gentle way he talked to nervous horses, the easy smile he had for everyone who came through the stable doors. She was not falling in love with him, she told herself firmly. She was just grateful, that was all. But gratitude did not explain the way her heart jumped when he laughed, or the warmth that spread through her chest when he praised her work, or the way she found herself looking forward to their evenings together, sitting on his porch and talking about everything and nothing while the sun set over the desert hills. 2 weeks after Catherine arrived in Oro Blanco, a man rode into town asking questions. Catherine was in the stable when Parker came to find her, his face serious. "There is a man at the saloon," he said quietly. "Says he works for Gerald Hutchins. He is showing around a sketch of a woman, asking if anyone has seen her." Catherine's blood ran cold. "Does it look like me?" "Enough," Parker admitted. "But you are not that woman anymore, remember? You are Catherine Ward, my stable hand. You have been here for months, working hard, minding your own business. That is the story, and we are sticking to it." "What if someone recognizes me?" Catherine asked. "Then we deal with it," Parker said firmly. "But I do not think they will. You look different now, healthier, happier. Your hair is always braided back, you wear work clothes, you carry yourself differently. Trust me, Catherine. Trust that I will protect you." Catherine wanted to argue, to insist that she should run, but looking into Parker's steady green eyes, she found herself nodding instead. "I trust you." The man from Tucson stayed in town for 2 days, asking questions, showing his sketch. Catherine stayed close to the stable, keeping her head down, and prayed that no one would make the connection. Parker was her shadow, always nearby, always watchful. On the second evening, the man came to the stable. "Evening," he said, dismounting from a dusty roan. "Name is Crawford. I am looking for someone, and I hear you are the man who knows everyone in town." Parker leaned against the stable door, perfectly relaxed. "I know most folks, I suppose." "What can I do for you?" Crawford pulled out a folded piece of paper and showed it to Parker. Catherine, who was grooming a horse in a nearby stall, could not see the sketch, but she did not need to. She knew what it showed. "Looking for this woman," Crawford said. "Name might be Catherine Ward, might be something else. She is wanted for theft and assault back in Tucson. There is a reward for information leading to her capture." Parker studied the sketch for a long moment. "Pretty girl," he said neutrally, "but I have not seen her. Sorry. You sure?" Crawford pressed. "She might have changed her appearance, might be using a different name." "I am sure," Parker said. "Like I said, I know most everyone around here. A strange woman passing through I would notice." Crawford's eyes narrowed. "What about her?" He gestured toward Catherine, who had gone very still in the stall. "Her," Parker said. "That is just my stable hand. Been working for me for a few months now." "She got a name?" Crawford asked. Catherine forced herself to turn around to meet the man's gaze directly. "Catherine," she said, because lying about that seemed more suspicious than telling the truth. "Catherine Ward." Crawford's eyebrows rose. "Same name as the woman I am looking for." "It is a common name," Catherine said with a shrug. "I am from Kansas, been here since spring." "That right?" Crawford studied her closely and Catherine held her breath. Then he turned back to Parker. "You vouch for her." "With my life," Parker said firmly. "She is a good worker and honest as the day is long. If you are looking for some criminal from Tucson, you are barking up the wrong tree." Crawford looked between them, clearly suspicious but unable to pin down exactly why. Finally, he nodded and tucked the sketch back into his pocket. "All right, then. But if you do see this woman, there is $200 in it for you. You can reach me through Hutchins Ranch in Tucson." "I will keep that in mind," Parker said. They watched Crawford ride away, and Catherine did not breathe properly until he was out of sight. Then her legs gave out and she sat down hard on a hay bale, shaking. Parker was beside her immediately, his hand on her shoulder. "It is all right. He is gone. You are safe." "He looked right at me," Catherine whispered. "He looked right at me and he did not know." "Because you are not the same woman who ran from Hutchins," Parker said. "You are stronger now, braver. You hold your head up. That changes how people see you." Catherine looked up at him, this man who had risked so much for her, lied for her, protected her without asking for anything in return. "Parker," she said softly, "why are you really doing all this?" Parker was quiet for a long moment. Then he knelt down in front of her, his green eyes searching her face. "You really want to know?" "Yes," Catherine said. "Because when you rode into town 2 weeks ago, dusty and desperate and defiant, something in my chest just shifted," Parker said. "I looked at you and I thought, there she is. The person I have been waiting for. I know that sounds crazy. I know we barely know each other, but I have not been able to stop thinking about you since that first day. The way you stood up to me, the way you refused to show fear even though you were terrified. The way you have worked so hard, never complaining, always giving everything you have. He stopped, took a breath. "I am falling in love with you, Catherine. Maybe I have already fallen, and I would do anything, risk anything to keep you safe." Catherine's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. "Parker," she breathed. "You do not have to say anything," Parker said quickly. "I know this is not the right time. You have been through hell and you need time to heal, time to figure out who you are when you are not running or scared or fighting for your life. I just needed you to know. I needed to be honest with you." Catherine reached out and took his hand, threading her fingers through his. "I do not need time," she said. "I already know. I have been trying to tell myself that what I feel for you is just gratitude, just relief at being safe. But it is more than that, so much more. When I am with you, I feel like I can breathe for the first time in months. When you smile at me, my whole world gets brighter. When you are near me, I feel home. I feel like I have finally come home." Parker's breath caught. "Catherine." "I am falling in love with you too," Catherine said. "Maybe I have already fallen." For a moment, they just looked at each other, and then Parker was leaning in and Catherine was meeting him halfway, and their lips touched in a kiss that was soft and sweet and full of promise. Catherine's eyes fluttered closed and she leaned into him, her free hand coming up to cup his cheek, feeling the rasp of stubble against her palm. Parker kissed her like she was precious, like she was something to be treasured, and Catherine felt something inside her that had been broken and frozen begin to thaw and mend. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Parker rested his forehead against hers. "I have wanted to do that since the day you arrived," he admitted. "You should have," Catherine said, smiling. "Would have saved us both some time." Parker laughed, the sound full of joy and relief, and pulled her into his arms. Catherine wrapped her arms around his neck and held on tight, feeling safe and cherished and loved in a way she had never experienced before. They courted properly after that, or as properly as two people living in the same house could manage. Parker was unfailingly respectful, never pushing Catherine further than she was ready to go, always giving her space and time to heal from the trauma of her past. They worked side by side in the stable during the day, and in the evenings they sat together on the porch or took long walks through the hills surrounding Oro Blanco, talking about their dreams and fears and everything in between. Catherine learned that Parker had come to Arizona 5 years ago with his brother, both of them looking for a fresh start after their sister's death. He had worked as a ranch hand for a while before saving up enough to buy the stable, and he loved his life in Oro Blanco, loved the simple satisfaction of working with horses and being part of a community. Parker learned that Catherine had grown up happy, the beloved only child of a rancher who had taught her to ride and rope and shoot. Her mother had died when Catherine was 12, and after that it had been just her and her father, running their small ranch together. When her father had started gambling, trying to dull the pain of his grief, Catherine had tried to stop him, but she had been too young, too powerless. His death had left her alone and vulnerable, and Gerald Hutchins had taken full advantage of that. "I am never going to be that powerless again," Catherine said one evening as they sat watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "I am going to learn to take care of myself, to stand on my own 2 feet. I never want to be dependent on anyone ever again." Parker took her hand. "Being able to depend on someone is not the same as being powerless," he said gently. "Letting someone help you, letting someone love you, that is not weakness. That is strength." "I know," Catherine said, "but I need to know I can survive on my own. I need to prove that to myself." "Then we will make sure you can," Parker said. "I will teach you everything I know about running a stable, about managing money, about protecting yourself. And when you are ready, when you feel strong enough, we will figure out what comes next, together." Catherine smiled and leaned her head on his shoulder. "Together," she echoed. The months passed, summer fading into fall and fall into winter. Catherine thrived under Parker's patient teaching and the honest work of the stable. She learned to manage the books, to negotiate with customers, to handle even the most difficult horses with confidence and skill. She also learned to shoot, Parker taking her out into the desert and teaching her how to handle a rifle and a pistol, how to aim and breathe and squeeze the trigger smoothly. "You are a natural," Parker said one afternoon after Catherine had hit the makeshift target 5 times in a row. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" "My father," Catherine said. "Before the gambling took over his life, he taught me everything he knew. I had just forgotten for a while, or maybe I had just forgotten who I was." "And who are you?" Parker asked. Catherine lowered the gun and turned to face him, the winter sun bright on her face. "I am Catherine Ward," she said firmly. "I am a survivor. I am strong and capable and brave, and I am loved." Parker's smile was radiant. "Yes, you are," he said, "so very loved." They were married in the spring of 1883. A simple ceremony in the small church in Oro Blanco, with half the town in attendance. Catherine wore a dress of pale blue calico that the seamstress in town had made for her, and Parker wore his best suit, looking handsome and proud as he waited for her at the altar. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife and told Parker he could kiss his bride, the kiss was sweet and tender and full of the promise of all the years to come. They honeymooned by taking 3 days away from the stable, riding up into the mountains and camping under the stars. They made love for the first time in a meadow full of wildflowers, the spring grass soft beneath them and the sky endless above them. Catherine had been nervous, the memories of Gerald Hutchins' rough hands still haunting her sometimes. But Parker was endlessly patient and gentle, worshipping her body with his hands and mouth until she forgot to be afraid and lost herself in pleasure. Afterwards, lying in his arms with the stars wheeling overhead, Catherine felt truly free for the first time in her life. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you so much it scares me sometimes." "Do not be scared," Parker murmured, pressing a kiss to her hair. "I am not going anywhere. This is forever, Catherine. You and me forever." "Forever," Catherine agreed and believed it with her whole heart. They returned to Oro Blanco and settled into married life. Catherine was no longer just Parker's stable hand but his full partner in every sense of the word. They ran the business together, making decisions together, working side by side every day. The stable prospered under their joint management, and soon they were able to expand, adding more stalls and taking on more boarders. Life was good, better than Catherine had ever imagined it could be. She woke up every morning next to the man she loved, worked hard at something she was good at, and went to sleep each night feeling safe and content. The nightmares that had plagued her in those first weeks after fleeing Tucson faded, replaced by dreams of the future, of the life she and Parker were building together. Then, nearly a year after their wedding, Catherine realized she was pregnant. She told Parker one evening after they had closed up the stable for the night. They were sitting on their porch, as had become their habit, watching the sun set over the desert. Catherine was nervous, unsure how Parker would react to the news, but she need not have worried. "A baby," Parker said, his voice full of wonder. "We are going to have a baby." "Yes," Catherine said, smiling at his expression. "In about 6 months, if I am calculating correctly." Parker let out a whoop of joy and swept her up in his arms, spinning her around until she was laughing and dizzy. "We are going to have a baby," he shouted to the empty street, not caring who heard. "I am going to be a father." "Put me down, you fool," Catherine said, still laughing. "You are going to make me sick." Parker set her down gently and immediately dropped to his knees, pressing his ear against her still flat stomach. "Hello in there," he said softly. "This is your papa. I am very excited to meet you." Catherine ran her fingers through his hair, her heart so full of love she thought it might overflow. "You are going to be a wonderful father," she said. "I am going to try," Parker said, looking up at her with shining eyes. "I am going to give this baby everything I have. Love and support and a good home. Everything my sister never got to give her children." The pregnancy was not easy. Catherine was sick for the first few months, able to keep down only dry bread and weak tea. Parker hovered over her anxiously, trying to help but mostly just getting in the way until Catherine finally had to shoo him out of the house so she could rest. As her belly grew, the work in the stable became more difficult, but Catherine stubbornly refused to stop completely. Parker finally convinced her to take on lighter duties, managing the books and dealing with customers while he handled the heavy physical work. "You are carrying our child," he said firmly when she protested. "That is work enough. Let me take care of the rest." "I do not want to be useless," Catherine argued. "You could never be useless," Parker said, cupping her face in his hands. "You are growing a whole human being inside you. That is the most important job in the world." Their son was born on a cold January night in 1884, after a long and difficult labor that left Catherine exhausted but triumphant. Parker was there the whole time, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, whispering encouragement and love. When the midwife finally placed the squalling, red-faced infant in Catherine's arms, Catherine looked down at her son and felt a love so fierce and protective it nearly overwhelmed her. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "I am your mama." Parker was crying, tears streaming down his face as he looked at his wife and child. "He is perfect," he said hoarsely. "Absolutely perfect. They named him Peter after Parker's father, and he was indeed perfect. A healthy, hungry baby with a shock of dark hair and his father's green eyes. Parker was besotted from the first moment, constantly holding his son, talking to him, showing him the horses in the stable even though Peter was far too young to understand. "You are going to spoil him," Catherine said one afternoon, watching Parker walk around the stable with Peter tucked in the crook of his arm, pointing out each horse and explaining their personalities. "That is my right as his father," Parker replied, grinning. "Besides, it is never too early to start his education. He is going to grow up knowing horses like the back of his hand." Catherine laughed and shook her head, but she did not really mind. Watching Parker with their son, seeing the gentleness and love in every interaction, only made her love him more. Life settled into a new rhythm with a baby in the house. Catherine managed the stable office while caring for Peter, who proved to be a relatively easy baby, sleeping well and nursing eagerly. Parker continued to do most of the physical work, but as Peter grew older and Catherine regained her strength, they fell back into their old partnership, working together to keep the stable running smoothly. Peter was 6 months old when Gerald Hutchins finally came to Oro Blanco. Catherine was in the house, nursing Peter, when she heard the commotion from the stable. Raised voices, one of them unmistakably Parker's, tight with anger. She quickly settled Peter in his cradle and hurried out to the stable, her heart pounding. Gerald Hutchins stood in the stable yard, looking older and harder than Catherine remembered. He had a scar now, running across his forehead, a permanent reminder of the day Catherine had struck him with a shovel. He was flanked by 2 rough-looking men, hired guns by the look of them, and he was facing down Parker with a sneer on his face. "I know she is here, Brennan," Hutchins was saying. "I have been asking around. People remember a woman coming to town about 2 years back, matching her description. Working in your stable, living in your house." "I do not know what you are talking about," Parker said, his voice dangerously calm, "and I am going to have to ask you to leave my property." Hutchins laughed, an ugly sound. "You think you can protect her? She is a thief and a criminal. She stole my horse and tried to kill me. There is still a warrant out for her arrest." "Then take it up with the marshal," Parker said, "but you are not welcome here." "I am not going anywhere without what is mine," Hutchins snarled. He looked past Parker, and his eyes locked on Catherine, who had frozen in the stable doorway. "There she is. There is the little whore who thought she could get away." Parker's fist connected with Hutchins' jaw before the man could say another word. Hutchins went down hard, spitting blood, and his 2 hired guns immediately drew their weapons. Parker ignored them, standing over Hutchins with his hands clenched into fists. "You watch your mouth when you talk about my wife," he said, his voice shaking with rage. "That woman is twice the person you will ever be. She defended herself against a pig who could not keep his hands to himself, and I will not stand here and let you slander her name." "Your wife," Hutchins laughed, pushing himself up to his feet. "So you married her. That is rich. Did she tell you what she did? Did she tell you she bashed my skull in and left me for dead?" "She told me everything," Parker said, "including why she did it. You tried to rape her, Hutchins. You bought her father's debts and used them to trap her, to force her into your service, and then you tried to force yourself on her. As far as I am concerned, the only crime here is that she did not hit you harder." One of the hired guns raised his pistol, pointing it at Parker. "That is enough, Cowboy. Step aside and let us take the woman." Catherine's hand went to the gun she had tucked into her skirt pocket, the one Parker had given her and taught her to use. She stepped forward, her voice clear and steady despite the fear coursing through her. "I am not going anywhere with you," she said. "I am Parker Brennan now, not Catherine Ward. I have a husband and a son and a life here. Whatever happened in Tucson is in the past. The law does not see it that way, Hutchins said, wiping blood from his mouth. You are wanted for theft and assault. I can have you dragged back to Tucson in chains. Try it, Parker said flatly. I would love to see you explain to a judge why you think you have the right to collect on a debt that was paid in full by 8 months of unpaid labor. Or maybe you would like to explain why you felt entitled to force yourself on a woman who was working for you. I am sure the judge would find that very interesting. Hutchins' face darkened. You have no proof of anything. I have Catherine's testimony, Parker said. And I am willing to bet she is not the only woman you have tried this with. You push this, Hutchins, and I will make sure everyone in Arizona territory knows exactly what kind of man you are. For a long moment, the two men stared at each other, and Catherine held her breath. Then the marshal appeared, walking up the street with his hand on his gun. What is going on here? Marshal Daniels asked. He was a fair man in his 50s who had always been friendly to Parker and Catherine. Got reports of shouting. This man is harassing my wife, Parker said immediately. Making false accusations and threatening her. False accusations, Hutchins sputtered. This woman is wanted for crimes in Tucson. Marshal Daniels looked at Catherine, then back at Hutchins. You got paperwork to back that up. Warrants, arrest orders, anything official. Hutchins hesitated. I have a reward poster. A reward poster is not a warrant, the marshal said. And even if you did have one, you got no jurisdiction here. If you want to press charges against Mrs. Brennan, you will need to go through proper legal channels. File a complaint in Tucson. Have a judge review the evidence, and if he decides there is a case, he will issue an arrest warrant. Until then, I suggest you leave these good people alone. This is not over, Hutchins said, glaring at Catherine. I will make you pay for what you did. I think we are done here, Marshal Daniels said firmly. You and your men need to leave town. Now. Hutchins looked like he wanted to argue, but faced with the marshal's steady gaze and Parker's protective stance, he finally backed down. This is not finished, he said again, and stalked off with his men following. Catherine sagged with relief, and Parker was immediately at her side, his arm around her waist supporting her. It is all right, he murmured. He is gone. You are safe. Marshal Daniels cleared his throat. Mind if I have a word with you both? Inside. They went into the house, and Catherine checked on Peter, who was sleeping peacefully through all the drama, before joining Parker and the marshal at the kitchen table. I am going to level with you, the marshal said. I do not know what really happened between you and Hutchins, Mrs. Brennan, and I do not particularly care. You have been a good citizen of this town, you and your husband both. You work hard, you do not cause trouble, and you have earned the respect of everyone here. Whatever Hutchins says you did, I am inclined to take your side. Thank you, Catherine said quietly. That being said, the marshal continued, Hutchins is not going to let this go. He is a vindictive son of a gun, pardon my language, and he has money and connections. If he really does file charges in Tucson, there might not be much I can do to protect you. So what do we do? Parker asked. You might want to think about making this official, the marshal said. File your own complaint against Hutchins. Document what he did to you, Mrs. Brennan. Get it on the record. That way, if he does try to pursue charges, you have your own case to fall back on. It will be his word against yours, but at least you will have a fighting chance. Catherine looked at Parker, who nodded encouragingly. All right, she said. I will do it. I will tell the whole truth about what Gerald Hutchins did to me. Over the next few days, Catherine gave a full statement to Marshal Daniels, detailing everything that had happened at Hutchins' ranch. It was painful, reliving those months of fear and degradation, but Parker was beside her the whole time, holding her hand, lending her strength. The marshal wrote everything down and promised to send the statement to the territorial authorities in Tucson. "I cannot guarantee anything," he said. "But this will help your case if Hutchins tries to push things." True to his word, Hutchins did try to push things. He filed formal charges in Tucson, accusing Catherine of theft and attempted murder. But when the judge reviewed the evidence, including Catherine's own statement and testimony from several women who had worked for Hutchins over the years, and who came forward to corroborate Catherine's account of his behavior, the charges were dismissed. The judge went further, issuing a restraining order against Hutchins, forbidding him from coming within 100 miles of Oro Blanco or having any contact with Catherine. Hutchins tried to appeal, but the ruling stood. When Marshal Daniels brought them the news, Catherine wept with relief. "It is really over," she asked. "He cannot hurt me any more. It is really over," the marshal confirmed. "You are free, Mrs. Brennan, officially and legally free." Parker pulled her into his arms, and Catherine buried her face in his chest, letting the tears come. They were tears of relief and joy and release, washing away the last of the fear and shame she had carried for so long. "You did it," Parker murmured into her hair. "You stood up to him and you won." "We won," Catherine corrected, looking up at him with shining eyes. "I could not have done it without you." "We make a good team," Parker said, smiling. "The best team," Catherine agreed and kissed him. Life returned to normal after that, or as normal as life with a growing toddler could be. Peter was walking now, getting into everything, fascinated by the horses and the stable and the wide open spaces of the Arizona desert. Catherine and Parker watched him grow with pride and wonder, marveling at how quickly he was changing, how much of both of them they could see in his face and personality. When Peter was 3, Catherine discovered she was pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and their daughter Rose was born in the spring of 1887, a tiny, delicate baby with Catherine's dark hair and a surprisingly loud cry. "A girl," Parker said, awe in his voice as he held his newborn daughter. "We have a daughter." "Rose Brennan," Catherine said, smiling at the sight of her big, strong husband cradling the tiny infant with such gentleness. "What do you think, Peter? Do you like your baby sister?" Peter, who had been watching the whole proceeding with wide eyes, nodded solemnly. "She is small," he announced. "I will protect her." "I know you will," Catherine said, pulling her son close for a hug. "You are going to be the best big brother." The years passed in a happy blur. Peter and Rose grew, the stable continued to prosper, and Catherine and Parker's love for each other only deepened with time. They had their challenges, of course. There were droughts that made water scarce, harsh winters that tested their endurance, the normal ups and downs of life and business. But they faced everything together, partners in every sense of the word. When Peter was 10 and Rose was 7, they expanded the stable again, adding a second building and hiring additional help. Peter was already showing a natural talent for working with horses, just as Parker had predicted, and he spent every spare moment in the stable, learning everything he could from his father. Rose, meanwhile, proved to have her mother's head for business. She loved helping Catherine with the books, carefully recording every transaction in her neat, precise handwriting. "When I grow up, I am going to run the whole stable," she announced one day. "Papa and Peter can work with the horses, and Mama and me will handle everything else." "Mama and I," Catherine corrected automatically, but she was smiling. "And I think that sounds like an excellent plan." On their 15th wedding anniversary, Parker surprised Catherine with a trip to San Francisco. They left the children with a trusted neighbor and took the train west, spending a week exploring the bustling city by the bay. It was Catherine's first time seeing the ocean, and she stood on the beach with tears in her eyes, overwhelmed by the vast expanse of water stretching to the horizon. "It is so big," she whispered. "I never imagined anything could be so big." Parker wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "You have come a long way from the scared woman who rode into Oro Blanco on a stolen horse," he said softly. "Thanks to you," Catherine said, leaning back against him. "Thanks to you," Parker corrected. "You did the hard work, Catherine. You healed yourself. You built a life. I just loved you while you did it." Catherine turned in his arms to face him. "You did more than that. You saved me, Parker. In every way a person can be saved." "Then I guess we saved each other," Parker said, and kissed her as the waves crashed on the shore behind them. They returned to Oro Blanco refreshed and more in love than ever, ready to face whatever came next. Peter was nearly grown now, a tall, serious young man who had his father's way with horses and his mother's determination. Rose was still in school but already making plans for her future, talking about expanding the business, maybe opening a second location in Tucson. Tucson. Catherine said, surprised. "I thought you would want to stay in Oro Blanco." "I do," Rose said. "But the business is growing, Mama. We could do so much more if we had a presence in a bigger city. And besides—" She paused, then continued quietly, "I want to go back there. To the place where your story started. I want to prove that we are not afraid of it anymore." Catherine looked at her daughter, this brave, brilliant girl, and felt pride swell in her chest. "You are right," she said. "We are not afraid anymore. And if you want to open a stable in Tucson, then we will do it. Together." They did open a second stable in Tucson 2 years later, with Rose managing the new location and Peter helping to get it established before returning to run the Oro Blanco operation. It was a huge success, and within 5 years they had opened a third location in Phoenix. The Brennan name became synonymous with quality horse care and fair dealing throughout Arizona territory. Catherine and Parker gradually stepped back from the day-to-day operations, letting their children take over while they enjoyed a well-earned semi-retirement. They spent their days working in the garden Parker had planted behind their house, taking long rides through the desert they both loved, and doting on the grandchildren that started arriving once Peter and Rose married and started families of their own. On a warm evening in the spring of 1912, Catherine and Parker sat on their porch, just as they had done countless times over the past 30 years. Catherine was 70 now, her dark hair streaked with silver, but her eyes were still bright and her spirit was still strong. Parker was 73, moving a bit slower than he used to but still tall and straight, his green eyes still full of the warmth and love that had captured Catherine's heart so many years ago. "You remember the day we met?" Catherine asked, watching the sunset paint the sky in familiar shades of orange and pink. "Every detail," Parker said. "You rode into town on a stolen horse, looking like you were ready to fight the whole world, and I took one look at you and knew my life was about to change." "You smiled at me," Catherine said, "and offered me grain for the horse, I mean." "Best decision I ever made," Parker said. "Offering you grain," Catherine laughed. "Is that what you are calling it? What would you call it?" Parker asked. "The beginning of everything," Catherine said softly. "The beginning of my real life. The beginning of happiness and love and belonging. You gave me all of that, Parker. You and this town and this life we built together." "We gave it to each other," Parker said, taking her hand and raising it to his lips. "And I would do it all again in a heartbeat. Every moment, every challenge, every joy. All of it." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sun sink below the horizon. Around them, the town of Oro Blanco was settling in for the night. Lights were coming on in windows, people were heading home from work, children were being called in from play. It was a good town, a good life, full of good people. Do you think they will remember us? Catherine asked suddenly. After we are gone, I mean. Do you think Peter and Rose and the grandchildren will remember our story? I think they will remember that we loved each other, Parker said. I think they will remember that we built something good together, something that lasted. I think they will remember that no matter what life threw at us, we faced it together and we never gave up. That is a pretty good legacy, if you ask me. The best legacy, Catherine agreed. She rested her head on Parker's shoulder, feeling his arm come around her, strong and steady as it had been for 30 years. I love you, Parker Brennan. I have loved you from the moment you smiled at me and offered me grain for my stolen horse. And I love you, Catherine Brennan, Parker said, pressing a kiss to her silver hair. I have loved you from that first moment and I will love you forever. That is a promise I intend to keep. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Catherine closed her eyes and smiled. She had ridden into Oro Blanco on a stolen horse with no apology, desperate and afraid and alone. But she had found a cowboy who smiled at her and offered her grain, and in doing so, she had found everything she had never known she needed. She had found home. She had found love. She had found herself. And that, Catherine thought as she drifted off to sleep in her husband's arms, was the greatest gift of all. The years continued to pass, gentle and full. Peter took over the Oro Blanco stable completely, running it with the same dedication and integrity his parents had shown. He married a kind woman named Sarah, a teacher at the local school, and they had 4 children who grew up racing around the stable yard, just as Peter had done. Rose expanded the business even further, opening locations in Flagstaff and Prescott, becoming one of the most successful businesswomen in Arizona. She married a lawyer named James who supported her ambitions and never tried to hold her back, and they had 3 children who inherited their mother's sharp mind and business acumen. Catherine and Parker watched it all with pride and satisfaction. They had started with nothing, with less than nothing really, just a desperate woman on a stolen horse and a kind man with a generous heart. And from that unlikely beginning, they had built an empire, a family, a legacy that would outlast them both. They celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary surrounded by children and grandchildren. The house full of laughter and love, and the kind of joy that only comes from a life well lived. Catherine looked around the crowded room at all the faces she loved, at the family she and Parker had created, and felt overwhelming gratitude. "What are you thinking about?" Parker asked, coming up beside her and slipping his arm around her waist. "I am thinking about how lucky I am," Catherine said. "How blessed. I could have died in that desert running from Hutchins, or I could have been caught and hanged, or I could have just kept running, never stopping, never finding a place to call home. But instead I found you, and you gave me this." She gestured to the room, to the family, to the life they had built together. "We gave it to each other," Parker insisted, as he always did. "I was just existing before you came along, Catherine, going through the motions, doing my work, but not really living. You woke me up. You made me want more, want better, want everything. We did that for each other then," Catherine conceded. "We saved each other." "Best kind of love story," Parker said and kissed her forehead, "when 2 people save each other." As the party continued around them, Catherine thought about all the moments that had led to this one. The terror of fleeing Tucson, the desperation of those first days in Oro Blanco, the leap of faith it had taken to trust Parker, to let him help her, to let herself love him. It had not been easy. There had been nightmares and flashbacks, times when she had pushed Parker away because she was too scared to let him close. Times when old fears had risen up and threatened to swallow her whole, but Parker had been patient. He had waited for her to heal at her own pace, never pushing, never demanding more than she could give. And slowly, carefully, Catherine had learned to trust again, to love again, to believe that she deserved happiness and safety and a good man who would never hurt her. The nightmares had eventually faded, replaced by dreams of the future. The scars from those months at Hutchins Ranch had healed, both the physical ones and the ones that went deeper. Catherine had learned to be strong, not despite what had happened to her, but because of it. She had learned that she was a survivor, that she could face anything and come out the other side. And Parker had been there for all of it, supporting her, loving her, believing in her even when she did not believe in herself. As the evening wound down and the family began to leave, grandchildren hugging their grandparents goodbye and promising to visit soon, Catherine felt a deep sense of peace. This was what happiness looked like, she thought. Not the absence of struggle or pain, but the presence of love strong enough to weather any storm. That night, lying in bed beside Parker, Catherine thought about the woman she had been 30 years ago. Young, scared, broken by what Gerald Hutchins had done to her. That woman would not have believed that this life was possible, that she could be this happy, this loved, this whole. "What are you thinking about now?" Parker asked sleepily, his arm draped over her waist. "About the day I rode into town," Catherine said. "About how terrified I was. About how certain I was that I would never be safe again." Parker pulled her closer. "But you were safe. From that very first day you were safe." "Because of you," Catherine said. "Because you had the courage to accept help," Parker countered. "Because you trusted me, even when trust was the hardest thing in the world. That took real bravery, Catherine." "We have had a good life, have we not?" Catherine asked. "The best life," Parker confirmed. "And we are not done yet. We have many more years ahead of us." He was right about that. They had 7 more good years. 7 years of watching their family grow and thrive, of enjoying their grandchildren and eventually their great-grandchildren, of sitting on their porch and watching sunsets and remembering. Parker died peacefully in his sleep in the spring of 1919, 2 months after their 47th anniversary. He was 80 years old and had lived a long, full, happy life. Catherine woke up beside him and knew immediately that he was gone. She did not cry, not at first. She just lay there holding his hand, grateful for every moment they had shared, every laugh and tear and kiss and conversation. "Thank you," she whispered to him. "Thank you for everything. Thank you for seeing me that day, for helping me, for loving me. Thank you for giving me this beautiful life." She had him buried in the small cemetery on the hill overlooking Oro Blanco, with a simple headstone that read Parker Brennan, beloved husband, father, and friend. At the funeral, Catherine stood surrounded by her children and grandchildren and told stories about the man who had changed her life. She told them about the day they met, about how he had smiled at her and offered her grain for her stolen horse. She told them about his kindness, his patience, his unwavering love and support. "Your grandfather was the best man I ever knew," she told them. "He saved my life in every way a person can be saved, and I will love him until the day I die and beyond." Catherine lived for 6 more years after Parker's death. She spent her days working in the garden, playing with her great-grandchildren, helping Rose and Peter with the business when they needed advice. She was not lonely exactly because she was surrounded by family, but there was an emptiness in her life now, a space that only Parker had been able to fill. She thought about him every day, remembered his smile, his laugh, the feel of his arms around her. She talked to him sometimes, when she was alone in the house they had shared for so many years, telling him about the grandchildren's accomplishments, asking his advice about problems, sharing her thoughts and feelings as she had always done. On a warm September evening in 1925, Catherine sat on her porch watching the sunset. just as she had done thousands of times before. She was 83 years old now, her body frail but her mind still sharp. She thought about the life she had lived, about the journey that had brought her from that desperate flight from Tucson to this peaceful end. She had lived a good life, she thought, a life full of love and family and purpose. She had built something lasting, something that would continue long after she was gone. Her children were successful and happy, her grandchildren were thriving, and the business she and Parker had started with nothing but hard work and determination was now one of the most respected in Arizona. But more than any of that, she had loved and been loved in return. She had found safety and home and belonging in the arms of a kind cowboy who had smiled at her and offered her grain for her stolen horse. She had healed from wounds that once seemed unhealable. She had learned to trust again, to hope again, to believe in goodness and kindness and love. That was her real legacy, she thought. Not the stables or the money or the business success, but the love. The love she had shared with Parker, the love she had given to her children, the love that had spread out from that initial act of kindness like ripples in a pond, touching everyone who came into contact with the Brennan family. As the sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold, Catherine felt a profound sense of peace. She was tired, she realized, tired in a way that had nothing to do with the work of the day. She was ready to rest. "I am coming, Parker," she whispered to the evening air. "Wait for me just a little longer." Catherine Ward Brennan died peacefully in her sleep that night, surrounded by photographs of the people she loved, in the house she had shared with Parker for nearly half a century. She was buried beside him on the hill overlooking Oro Blanco, her headstone reading Catherine Brennan, beloved wife, mother, and friend. At her funeral, Rose stood up to speak about her mother. She told the gathered crowd about Catherine's strength and courage, about how she had overcome terrible circumstances to build a beautiful life. She told them about the love story between Catherine and Parker, about how two broken people had healed each other and created something wonderful together. "My mother rode into Oro Blanco on a stolen horse," Rose said, tears streaming down her face. "She was running from a man who had hurt her, terrified and alone and desperate. And my father, who was just a stable hand with a kind heart, smiled at her and offered her grain. That simple act of kindness changed both their lives forever. It changed all of our lives, because without that moment, none of us would be here today." She paused, looking out at the crowd, at the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who were all there, because of that one moment when Parker Brennan had chosen to help a desperate woman on a stolen horse. "My parents taught us that love is not just a feeling, it is a choice," Rose continued. "A choice to see someone who is hurting and offer help. A choice to trust when trust is difficult. A choice to build something together, day by day, year by year." They chose each other every single day for 47 years, and in doing so, they built a legacy that will last for generations. She smiled through her tears. "So I want you all to remember their story. Remember that kindness matters, that love matters. That one person choosing to help another person can change the world. My mother rode into town on a stolen horse with no apology, and my father smiled and offered her grain. And from that simple beginning came all of this, all of us. This family, this business, this community. All because two people chose love over fear, hope over despair, forgiveness over judgment." The crowd nodded, many of them wiping away their own tears. The story of Catherine and Parker Brennan had become legendary in Oro Blanco over the years, a reminder of the power of kindness and love. Their legacy lived on in their children and grandchildren, in the stables that still bore their name, in the memories of everyone who had known them. Years later, when the great-grandchildren asked about their famous ancestors, they would hear the story of the woman who rode into town on a stolen horse and the cowboy who smiled at her and offered her grain. They would hear about the love that had grown from that chance meeting, about the family that had been built on a foundation of trust and kindness and unwavering devotion. And they would understand that the best love stories are not the ones that start perfectly, but the ones where two imperfect people choose to love each other despite everything. Where healing is possible, where redemption is real, where kindness can change a life. The Brennan stables continued to operate for decades, passed down through the generations, always run with the same integrity and care that Catherine and Parker had established. The house on the edge of Oro Blanco remained in the family, cherished and maintained, a monument to the life that had been lived there. And on warm evenings, when the sun set over the desert in shades of orange and pink and gold, people walking past the old Brennan place would sometimes swear they could see two figures sitting on the porch, holding hands and watching the sunset together, just as they had done in life. Catherine Ward Brennan had ridden into Oro Blanco on a stolen horse with no apology, desperate and afraid and alone. But she had found a cowboy named Parker who had smiled at her and offered her grain, and in that simple act of kindness, she had found everything she had never known she needed. She had found home. She had found healing. She had found love that lasted a lifetime and beyond, and in the end, that was the greatest gift of all.